Welcome back to our special broadcast on Mid Morning Talk with Najma Khota on Salam Media. We are highlighting the introduction of the Lens 70 podcast series. It's part of the celebrations. It's also discussions in highlighting, as we said, the culture, the resilience, the struggle, and of course the development. And in our introduction with Ismail Vadi, we spoke about the sport. We touched on the sport. We touched on the media influence at the time as well. And joining us in this part of the program is Fakir Hassen, veteran journalist, broadcaster, and author as well, and Aslam Khota, a veteran cricket commentator and author. Now, the reason I chose to have this interview today is because, if I may, before I even say what I need to say, Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Walaikum assalam, rahmatullah, and the listeners.
Thank you so much, Fakir and Muhammad Aslam, for joining us this morning. Yes, as I was saying, that I chose to have this program today, this theme on the program today, because the idea of having a writers' fair, which was initiated by Muhammad Aslam, it just helped to, in fact, just highlight all of the work that was done and so many of the cultural aspects and many more benefits of the authors that have contributed to the history of Lenasia and the broader South Africa. So welcome, Muhammad Aslam. What was it? What was it that motivated you to give the idea of the Writers' Fair?
Well, Najma, I think it started when Ismail Vadi made overtures that we need to maybe just cover some sort of a sporting history, and with, in my case, particularly Lenasia. And so obviously I did do the contribution, but then I mentioned that what we need to do maybe is to also have a media launch or a media day, or as we said, a writers' fair. And I just needed to mention that to Ismail, and he latched onto it immediately. And before I knew it, he was mentioning a good dozen other wonderful talents from Lenasia and outside of Lens that have also written. And the list is almost endless. And so that sort of gave birth to this idea. And I'm happy to say that it's going to be happening on the 5th of July. Just watch this space, because Ismail was telling me that the venue is to be confirmed. If it's not at the Bedroot Mall in Lenasia, it may be at one of the schools, but we'll certainly let our keen writers and fans of good novelists and storytellers, exactly where the venue will be. But that really was the way it all started, as Najma.
Right. And Fakir, your role, can you take us through your very first contribution to the Lenasia Times and the history of the Lenasia Times? And you've contributed. I know that you to this day write for many newspapers, and now it's all digital as well. But because the focus is on Lenasia, the two newspaper publications, Lenasia Times and the Indicator newspaper, take us through that history.
Thanks, Najma. The Lenasia Times idea was born on a Lenasia bus one day. My dear friend, the late Wade Kamruddin, he always spoke to us about this idea. Sadly, others also shared the idea, and like me, were skeptical of it. Was the late Shabir Sayed, from the Sabri brothers. Mm-hmm. And we used to travel together on a bus from Lens into the city. And Wade would always talk about starting Lenasia's newspaper. And we would be a bit skeptical, I must confess, because in those days it wasn't a very easy task to start a newspaper. Firstly, the laws restricted it because you had to register with the GPO, the General Post Office, and you had to send copies to them and all sorts of things in the apartheid era. So, but Wade persisted, and he went door to door, starting out and getting support, and eventually he brought out that 8-page Lenasia Weekly, he called it then, although it appeared monthly. And within a few months, it started growing, and slowly it grew to the extent that it became Lenasia's most popular paper, the only paper, of course. Even when the Indicator arrived with Amin Ecclewire, Lenasia Times continued. And I remember a discussion with Amin when he started the paper. And Amin said to me, you know what? You guys are the ones who inform the community about why the dustbin is not being collected, when is the dust bowl going to be sorted out, which temple is having what function. I'm the one who will look at the political side of things. And that's exactly what he did. He became part of the alternative media, as they called them in those days,
Right.
in their own way, fighting oppression and so on. So the two newspapers were running parallel to each other and having kind of very different objectives.
Right. And in terms of your contribution, it also grew not just from making announcements, community announcements. There was a lot that had evolved in your reason for writing and why you wrote.
Absolutely. I must be eternally grateful to Wade and the Lenasia Times because that's where my entire grounding started in community journalism. And it's been almost 50 years now. And,
Goodness.
I didn't know much. I was very young then, and I didn't know very much about the community cultures, the differences in the community. I mean, being Muslim, I didn't know very much about the Hindu culture, for example. I didn't know about the community organizations. And over these years, I've learned about so much and done so much that without bragging, I'm quite proud of the fact that I can walk into any temple or mosque or church in the country and be welcomed with open arms, which is a
Right.
privilege very few people have. And
Right.
that started with the Lenasia Times.
And that's an indication of the diversification of, and the coexistence and cohesion, social cohesion that people lived in during the heart of our lives in Lenasia. I'm hoping, like we said, let's see what we can build for the future. But that, in fact, Aslam, speaks to your reason for writing, and perhaps your book titled Across the Divide is also speaks to that, because it is about the racial divisions, but then how sport in fact persevered to break that divide.
Yeah, I think I'd like to, coupled with what you've just said now, I'd like to latch on to what Fakir has just mentioned now, is that when we moved through to Lenasia in 1978, and I saw the Lenasia Times and covering some of the local sport, and I actually went into Wahid's flat at Juleka Mansions, as it was known then, and said to him that, listen, I'm keen to write on cricket because I noticed that as an alternative media, we were the only source of inspiration and sports news that could get out to the public, because the white newspapers or the white influenced media wouldn't cover our provincial cricket and our club cricket. So he said, bring it anytime because we'll make room for you. And I must say that on my second visit there, when I took the handwritten article to him, sitting on the one side of that particular office was the late, great Yusuf Nazir. So I had the opportunity to meet both of them. And Yusuf was so kind, he invited me to his home, and he had printed a number of books, the rudiments of journalism. And he says I was one of the first recipients of that, and I still have a copy. And I must say that really helped. And between the two of them, and the fact that Wahid gave space, I wasn't just able to do ordinary reports, but I was also able to do feature articles. And I must say that for me, that's also where it all started. I always wanted to be a writer of sorts. I'm a fan of not just cricket and sport, but I also enjoy reading very good cricket and football and basically articles on sport. So it was a wonderful, how can I say, a passage into trying to build something. And people normally call me a journalist. I'm not a journalist. Fakir is certainly a journalist because of all his time that he's had at the SABC News, and so on. I describe myself as a hobby writer. And you can tell it's a hobby because I've never been paid for my writing. And I've written close to 1,500 articles, some of it which has appeared in international publications, including the famous Wisden. So and local newspapers like the it was then the Weekly Mail, the Sunday Times, the Star. So all of that came through the fact that I was able to work with Wahid in the early days, and then of course Amin recruited me uh, to be part of the Indicator. And I must say that the rudiments of writing, the actual discipline of writing, was very much under Amin Akalwaya's watch, and I learned even more there. So Lenasia is such an amazing place because there you got your own newspapers. We literally started, or Wahid literally started a knock and drop culture in Lenasia, and we've seen how it's gone throughout the country. And I must say that he was certainly one of the leading lights there. So, in every way, that when we go back and look at the newspapers and the writers that we've produced, I must say that they've had a lot to do with it. As far as my book is concerned, in 2002, I was asked by the Transformation Committee of Cricket South Africa and also Gauteng Cricket Board, or the Transvaal Cricket Board as it was known then, to write the history of cricket in the Transvaal. There was nobody else to write it. I mean, Akalwaya had passed away. They came back to me and said that we have no one else. You need to do this. And with the help of Chap Garda and also the late Kulam Majum, I was then able to put the book together across the Great Divide, Transvaal cricket's joys, struggles, and triumphs. And hopefully, some of the articles that have appeared between then and now, I'll be hoping to republish that book and include some of the stuff that I've done recently.
Mm-hmm.
Can I, Najma, can I
Certainly.
just mention something about Joe Naziria?
Yes.
Since he was also one of my mentors and Wade's mentor. He also
Mm.
contributed a lot to Lenasia Times. But you know, what is not commonly known is that Nazir actually started the first newspaper in Lenasia before the Lenasia Times for a very short while. Now, we've
Uh-huh.
not been able to, he would never talk about it when we asked him. He said it's in his past. But we've not been able to trace any records of that or anything. And maybe through your platform here at Salam Media, there's somebody who knows more about that who could inform us about that.
Mhm.
Right. And even though he wasn't a published author as such, he was a print journalist. And I know
Yes, a
most
very,
edu-
very prolific writer on
yes.
diverse issues.
Right, right. So, what was, you mentioned your history, Fakir, but can you elaborate a bit more on, this whole cultural and historical aspect of Lenasia growing into what it has today? I know that you're no longer a resident in Lenasia, and I'll make you feel guilty about that.
Yeah,
But you're
yeah,
still
that's
very
a
much,
long story. Yeah.
yes, but you're very much a Lenasian
But I
anyway.
spent many years in Lenasia, and you know, what had happened over those years is that learning experience for myself of the cultures and so on. It made me amass a lot of material over the years. Unfortunately, a lot of it lost along the way as well. But since the 2000s and early late 90s and so on, there was enough material for me to put together a number of books, as you know. They're now sitting
Yes,
at about 30 odd. So, you know, and in those I record the social and the community and the cultural history of our community. As you know, I always take pictures and so on. So those
right.
books have become, I'm glad to say, they become research tools, not just for schools in Lenasia and elsewhere. But I'm even proud that one of my Bollywood books, for example, is being used by researchers in the UK. I got a message from
Okay.
someone there, and
Hmm.
others of my books on the 1994 and you know how things have changed before and after 94 are being used at academic institutions in Australia. So I get very pleased when I get that sort of feedback because I've always said all my books are open source. They are available
Right.
free for quoting and for anyone who wants it. And even when I have them digital, they're available and accessible free of charge. And may I then mention the Lenasia 70 project that we've just started now. So
Yes.
what's going, or you going to come to that?
Yes, I will. Because I just had something I needed to add to what you were saying, and it's important that we say this because we know we're looking at legacy, we're looking at preserving history, and both you and Aslam are not well. You formalized journalists, Aslam, not so much. Like he said, he's a hobby writer, But what both of you have done is actually, in your own capacity, preserve the work you've done. Because I've seen your books, not all of them, Fakir, but I know how you collect your, uh, your work and your material, including the photographs, and you compile it into a book, and you give it a name, and you give it a theme. So for that, having done that, you've actually helped to preserve the history and making it accessible. So it's your journey. We see your journey in it, but at the same time, it's given us the opportunity to peek into that history, and Aslam's done the same.
Absolutely. My firm belief is always that, especially at my age, I'm 72 now. If I don't share what I have, it's going to die with me. And the
Mm.
same applies to everyone in the community who has any information to share. Because if you keep it to yourself, it's going to die with you. But if you share it, it's going to live on in perpetuity. And that's one of the reasons behind the books I do. Because once you record it in books, it's going to be there forever and
Yes,
accessible for generations to come. And that's very important. And I'd like to encourage everybody. I always encourage younger people, sit with your grandparents, put on your cell phone and just chat to them and record it. So even if you don't make a book out of it or you don't write about it, but someone will, and they will then have access once your grandparents are gone. But there still be
correct.
that information around.
Right. And Aslam also, in his own way, has preserved that as well. And after having read his latest article, which he contributed to the Land 70 celebrations on cricket, ideally titled Dust to Glory, um, I want to talk more about that in terms of, just your contributions and preservations. And then after the break, I want you to elaborate on your article titled Dust to Glory.
Okay, just very quickly. I mean, when Ismail and yourself asked, and you asked me to contribute towards the Land 70 project, and particularly how cricket evolved in lands, I thought about it for a whole 2 weeks, mulled over it. I didn't say no. I was certainly going to do it. And then I remember telling Ismail that I'll, have an article between 1,000 and maybe 1,500 words. And as I went writing, I just plonked away for a good 6-7 hours in total, and it was quite massive. And eventually I sent it to him. It was worth 6,300 words plus. And my reasoning for that to Ismail was that if this is one opportunity to write about the history of cricket in Lenasia, it may be the only one. And for me, what was of great concern, and this is where the preservation comes into the discussion, Najma and Fakir, is that in 50 years' time, or in 30 years' time, when they celebrate 100 years, guys will want to know how did it start here in Lenasia? And there's absolutely, apart from, say, maybe my book and one or two other items, other books that there may have been about Lenasia, there'll be no history on how the game actually evolved here and sport evolved in the country, in the suburb. So for me, it was important to really do the well-researched history. I must say it could have been a whole lot longer, but there's no statistics. There's nothing about heroism, about any specific matches. It was all about the gentlemen that worked so hard to preserve the game when they had to move from all parts of Johannesburg into Lenasia and still try and preserve the great game. So really the article does revolve all around that.
Yeah, perfect. So 12:30, we take a break. When we come back, we talk more about the history of cricket and sport in Lenasia.
Blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together. It could only mean Albeit Lodge, your true home away from home. Albeit is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Albeit has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albeitlodge.co.za.
At this time of trial and worry, the blessings of charity are the ideal means to avoid calamity and despair. The Al Imdad Foundation gives you the opportunity to sponsor a share in a borehole in South Africa for just 1,000 Rand and provide what the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, called the best form of charity. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
As temperatures drop and winter grips the country, the less fortunate in South Africa are preparing for the harsh realities that this season brings. Africa Muslims Agency is distributing blankets, clothing, and other essentials to thousands across the country. Sponsor a winter pack for 320 Rand or a blanket for 160 Rand and spread warmth this winter. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Sponsor an orphan and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
Welcome back. We're speaking to Aslam Khota and Fakir Hassen, both print journalists. Aslam Khota, commentator, documentary producer and author. And of course, Fakir Hassen, veteran journalist, broadcaster and author. Aslam, before the break, I said I need you to elaborate on the contents of your article, specifically the one you contributed for the Len70 website.
Yeah, so as I was just saying, and to keep it as brief as possible, it was a real struggle when we were already so subjugated under apartheid as sports people. And with everything else, never forget struggle with facilities. So I've highlighted in every way I possibly could all of the personalities that were involved that made sure that no matter how tough the struggle was in dealing with white councillors and so on, and trying to work within the framework of draconian laws, some of our guys were able to achieve almost the unthinkable. And to me, I think it's in a way, apart from a preservation of the history, also paying tribute to all of those guys that did it, because had they not been at the forefront, at the coalface of the sport itself, and to preserve the sport and to inspire other generations, there wouldn't have been any cricket in Lenasia today. So it's in a way a tribute to all of them. It does cover in brief how cricket from a broader point of view, that means from a South African point of view downwards into all of the provinces, and particularly coming all the way into Johannesburg and then the trek to Lenasia. It's covered in quite a bit of detail. I'm not sure if the detailed article actually appears on the website, but I'm happy to share it with whoever wants to read through the entire history. But that it was, as I said earlier, that's why it was important for me as far as the history is concerned. Just to mention this very quickly, I mean, the likes of Ahmed Katrada and now even Ismail Wadi, amongst others, a few others, have recorded some of their memoirs. And by doing that, you invariably reflecting your own history. And I think that is so important. That's why Fakir made such an important point that everybody must make it a point to write. And it's amazing to see, after having spoken to Ismail, the number of contributors and writers in Lenasia alone is quite staggering, phenomenal. We've always been a very entrepreneurial community from the time Indians settled in South Africa and right up till today. And if you look at Lenasia as a community today, I think it is one of the most thriving communities in a former non-racial or a former non-white area. And it's such a story on its own. And just to take that whole thing further, I mean, we'll talk about the book fair and who's all involved in it. But there's a book by Rosina Teba, A Home on Foster Street. It's a memoir. Foster Street is a tiny little street from the eastern end of the Oriental Plaza to the Newtown Mosque. I don't think it's more than 150 meters. But that little street has a story of its own. And within that street, there was this little flat of families. And Rosina writes about the family. And what actually happens is you get a little reflection of life on a broader scale. And I think that's what more of our people in Lenasia need to do. And that way, invariably, the history somehow or the other gets recorded. And in time, in years to come, people will actually find that very, very interesting. So it's very important from that point of view that I think football needs to do the same. I know that during the time when Puti Esak was a writer for the Sunday Times, he did as best as he could. He was a member of, I think, of Swaraj or Bluebells. And then Iqbal Ghafoor played a tremendous role as far as covering soccer in Lenasia. And in fact, they started evolving in Lens. So these guys all made their contributions. Today, if you go into the archives, at least there's something to reflect back on. But you go beyond 1976, I think, the Lenasia Times, there's very little else, unless it's verbal, as Fakir said, you know, that if you don't talk to the old folks, the grandparents and the great-grandparents and your old friends, you'll really not know about the history of Lenasia. So I think that article encapsulates how cricket actually evolved and in Lenasia and how it became a force. And let's not forget, and to make this very important point, that during the struggle, Lenasia became the center of resistance in sport. And that's very important to note because the contribution of Indians in the whole struggle against apartheid and since apartheid, very little is written. So I think that preservation needs to be done. The Indian contribution has been phenomenal in every aspect of life. And if we don't write it, future generations will think that there were those few iconic fellows that shaped our country, and that's not true.
Yeah, the people on the ground. Fakir, you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I think Aslam would agree. That one of the very important things about sport in Lenasia, you know, the stuff I'm going through now, all the archives, we had so many codes there. We had volleyball, we had basketball, we had darts, we had almost every kind of sport genre there, and unfortunately it died. But what is very important is that all these organizations which were set up in Lenasia were not set up for the Indian community only. As Aslam rightly pointed out, Lenasia was a hotbed of resistance to racist apartheid policies in all facets, including sport. And so you find that in the sporting genres, we found Lenasia leading the way for having players of other race groups playing in Lenasia as well. Sure, it was primarily Indian because of the nature of it, living in an Indian area, but it was always open to all others as well.
Right, and that was very difficult in itself because when you say other races, I think the challenge was when it came to the white players, if I may use the term,
Yes.
right, Aslam, in terms of cricket, soccer, and all of it. Open to Fakir or Aslam.
Yes, they were privileged, of course, because they had their resources and they had their financial support from even the government, where the rest of us did not, the other communities did not. But within that group as well, there were those who supported the rest of us in their own way. They were a minority, but they were there. And yes, there were white players who played soccer in Lenasia, for example. Very few and far between, but they were there. Aslam?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to add to that. There were white cricketers as well that played here, and obviously a few African players too. But just to illustrate very quickly to your listeners and viewers, Najma, I mean, there's one great story where it involved Bluebells Football Club. And in 1973, when the Lenasia Stadium was complete, both the soccer and the cricket stadium, Bluebells obviously thought that they will now be able to play professional soccer at their home ground. And the policies of the Johannesburg City Council at that stage didn't allow them. And the reason was you can only play amongst Indians in Lenasia because it's an Indian area. And there was a Jewish lady that then took the struggle further for Bluebells to the city council to say, in essence, that we've moved these people into an area of their own. We've built the soccer stadium for them, and now you don't allow them to play on it. So Selma Brody was her name, and she really got involved in the struggle. And eventually the council relented, and Bluebells were able to play, can you believe it, on their own home ground in Lenasia, which they were denied for a number of years. So those are the type of stories that need to be told. Because imagine if we don't know the story, that this is how difficult and how simply absurd apartheid was.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, absolutely.
Fakir?
Yeah, I'm busy with this project of compiling a book from the archives of the Lenasia Times and the Indicator, and maybe later the Rising Sun as well. And for each year, it's a massive project of 47 books, which we hope to have by the end of the year.
Yes.
But why I want to touch on that now is the sports side of it. I'm finding so much there, in terms of sport and the codes that were there, and the resistance and everything else that Aslam has just mentioned. So, in a broader sense, it deals with many more areas. I've divided it into 5 sections, and it's a fascinating exercise, a big learning experience for myself as well, because there was a period when the Lenasia Times was published, and I was contributing from Durban, but very little while I lived there for 10 years, with Radio Lotus.
Lotus days, yes.
The Lotus FM days, yes. But when I came back, obviously I restarted with the Lenasia Times and still very active with it. But but the material that is coming up now, there's arts and culture, there's politics, there's education, even in education. I would lament what's happening in our schools today, not just in Lenasia, of course, but all over the country. Lenasia school sporting activities were fantastic. They were delivering champions. If there wasn't apartheid, we would be having them in what is now called Bafana and the Proteas and the Springboks, But our people couldn't take part. I'm sure Aslam will support that. We had champions who were denied the opportunities. And now that the opportunities have in a way opened up since 94, we're not seeing that. And I don't know what the reasons for that are. Maybe Aslam wants to venture a guess.
Yes, I want to speak about development as well, because the theme for this is, the struggle, resilience, and development. And this question was also posed to Dr. Vadi, in that how can we develop the future the community, I beg your pardon, how do we develop future communities? And with all of the problems we're having now, the challenges we're having now. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about your book after this next break. It's titled Hitting the Headlines in Lenasia.
Advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Meyer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Meyer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Meyer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Meyer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmeyer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Meyer, where every detail matters.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings, from short-term to life and investments. a full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Make a conscious choice. Sip for change and support Palestine Drinks Africa. With every can, you help end the genocide and stand in solidarity with Palestine. Choose between our original or sugar-free options available in a case of 24. Every sip is a step towards justice. Every purchase a powerful message of unity and support for the Palestinian cause. Contact 082 888 1440 or 082 7739 556 today and be part of the change. Palestine Drinks Africa. Sip for change. Liberty for everyone.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back. I am Najma Khota, and with me is Fakir Hassen and Aslam Khota. Fakir, before the break, you mentioned, in fact, the 12 editions of the proposed 47 by year end, titled hitting the headlines in Lenasia. It's an archival collection of yours, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I need to thank a couple of people, if you'll allow me, who allowed me to do this. Firstly, there's Wasim Kamruddin, the editor of Lenasia Times, and the family, of course, there who kept those papers, although there's one missing, which none of us can find. Then the Indicator, also, I didn't have all of them, and Ekelwaya's family, Farida and Zaitun in particular, they also kept copies, which they, and Mems Musa, you will recall he was an educator and a librarian at one of the schools in Lenasia.
Correct.
Now, he always used to tell me he's got the entire collection of the Lenasia Times and the Indicator, all of those that were published, but he never wanted to let me have access to them. But now he is also like me, no longer living in Lenasia. He's moved out, I think, somewhere to one of the suburbs with his daughter, if I'm not mistaken. But he had the foresight to donate all these papers to the Ahmed Katrada archives, which are building, which incidentally they're opening officially on this Saturday. I'm sure invitations have been going out. So they were kind enough to allow me access to use it. The papers are now fragile and some of them are dirty. Unfortunately, the Indicator, there isn't a complete collection, but there was enough for me to scan. Now, it's taken me 3 months just to scan the copies, and now I've started putting them together. So I'm now at 12 issues, which are put together and just neatening it up in terms of design and so on, which, inshallah, we will launch on the at the Lenasia Book Fair that's going to happen, that you've already spoken to Ismail Wadi about. So we want to make this accessible to everyone, not just Lenasia, the entire globe. So it's going to go up on the website. It will be accessible free of charge. But what we want to do is to try to make at least 20, 30 print copies to put into the libraries in Lenasia and the schools there, and in the public libraries, even the university libraries, as perhaps a beginner's research tool, if I may, for those wanting to do further research into Lenasia, So for that, we're looking for some sponsors, and I don't know if you're allowed here to just mention that it's going to cost around 150,000 rand for 47 books to do just 20 copies each. So the idea now is to, although we're going to give it free to anyone who wants it, we're asking people who download each book to perhaps donate 5 or 10 rand to contribute towards that. And I mean, if there's 47 books and we can build it from there, maybe we might reach that. Also to approach all the business houses in Lenasia. And there are so many there. Many of them, their history is in these books now. So I'm going to start approaching them, and hopefully they come on board, and maybe we can even have a sponsor for each book, from the business houses there. And,
sounds like
I've never been a salesman. I've never been able to sell anything in my life. So someone like Yusuf Dokrat who's helping me with this project, Lucy Sigaban is helping. So maybe they will assist in making it more widely known. And of course, now we've had your platform as well, which hopefully business people are listening to and will assist in that. But essentially, we want it to be free and accessible to everyone anyway.
Absolutely. Very quickly, what were your most defining moments in your career as a journalist?
It's difficult to pinpoint one, of course, as Aslam will tell you. For Aslam, it must have been one of the World Cups that he might have covered it. So for me, there were many highlights, meeting heads of state, of course, meeting Madiba, not just for the first time, but many times. And maybe a highlight for me that I always like to talk about is one day walking in with the Indian High Commissioner, who was taking some guests there to Madiba in his office in Houghton. And Madiba walked out and he ignored all of them, and he put his hand on my shoulder, came straight to me, and he says, "I see you remembered." I can't do his voice, of course. He said, you remembered. And I said, I thought, what is he talking about remembering? On a previous occasion, his guards had told me, don't use the flash, Aslam, you'll know, Madiba had an eye problem, so you could never use flash and bright lights. So, and I respected that, and I didn't have my flash on the camera. And Madiba was observant enough to see that. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "I see you listened," and he nodded his head. Now, that's a standout moment for me in my career, because here was the High Commissioner for India with some ministers from India waiting to greet him, and he's greeting me, this lowly journalist. Really special.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that with us. Aslam, what was your most defining moment?
It can't be as defined as Fakir's one. I can't even, because related to our topic, I mean, I just being given the opportunity to the new dispensation gave me an opportunity to be on radio and then on television and then to travel the world without taking a 5-cent piece out of my pocket. So I find myself in a very honored and a privileged position to have been able to do that for close to 23 years. So to find defining moments within that is very, very difficult. I mean, Fakir just said he's 72. He's probably in the business for about 50. And, obviously his one makes so much of sense, because out of all people, Fakir gets recognized by the great statesman himself. So I can't pinpoint on any particular one, Najma.
Okay. And, in the closing comments, I'd really like both of you to highlight what it is that you think would motivate or inspire the younger generation to continue in this legacy.
Well, for me, as I mentioned earlier, they should get down. They're so tech savvy these days, the young generation, They go onto TikTok and Instagram and all, and they're so used to using their cell phones. Use that instead of showing the cake you've baked or the new dress you've got. Sit down for a short while with your aged parents, grandparents, even elder siblings maybe, and record them and ask them a question or two. What was it like living in Fitas? Or what was it like playing cricket, where when you couldn't play at these grounds and you had all these stumps on dry grass or whatever, Ask these questions, get them recorded. Somebody somewhere will take it together and keep it there for posterity. It's already there once you've recorded it for posterity. Someone needs to just get it all together and make books out of it, like Aslam did with cricket.
Aslam, what would you say?
Yeah, as I realize that the time has gone so quickly, it's been such a lovely discussion. Writing is a way of preserving your own family history, your community history, and of course, history on a wider scale. I'd just like to point out, whilst we've got this opportunity, that there's a number of writers that are going to be there on the 5th of July. And remember, we're going to confirm the venue. But just to give you an example, I mean, some of them are not even journalists or writers or authors. They just decided to put pen to paper, and they produced some remarkable work. An Unbreakable Woman by Natasha Morgan, Tears of the Weaver. Now, Zahira Gina Asvat, who was very much the key to the formation of the Josie Books and Blogs Festival. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen anymore. But that gave rise to an awareness to the importance of writing and reading. So Tears of the Weaver by herself, and then that fantastic book, The Saffron, a collection of narratives. of Muslim women, and then of course riding the Samosa Express, which I think was very, very popular. I must admit I didn't read it, but in my family the ladies did, and they really enjoyed it. And then Ismail Wadi himself, I mean, the struggles against apartheid education in Lenasia. You talk about apartheid education in Lenasia. When you read the book, you get a broad aspect of what apartheid education was like. So it's so important to do that. And then Young Lions of Lenasia, the famous Lenasia Youth League, of which he was obviously very much a part of, and the role they played in whilst the likes of Wahid and Amin played the role as writers, these guys were activists and they did so much. And then Ahmed Isup, the award-winning novelist, most of his writing reflects that of family life, and he's late, but his legacy lives on, and I'm sure that his family is going to be represented there. And then a friend of mine, Niren Tolsi, he was voted Journalist of the Year. He won a few fellowships as well, to boot. And then he's written lots of articles for premier newspapers in South Africa, and he's put a book together. It's called Writing Around the Wicket. Not necessarily a cricket journalist, but very, very sound and au fait with the sport itself, race, class, and history in South African cricket. And he writes lovingly and endearingly on Temba Bavuma, the Temba that nobody knew. And I must say that when I read his book a few months back, I was absolutely amazed that he was able to uncover and dig out this personality that is the South African captain now, a celebrated South African captain along with Siya Kolisi, because he's won a World Cup. And then there's a story about Hashim Amla in that book, which is more than fascinating. He's such a phlegmatic character that you wouldn't be able to just dig into Hashim that easily. Many journalists have tried. Niren has actually achieved that. So he's going to be there. He's going to talk about his book. There's also a story in his book which he writes about the trek from Fitas to Lenasia and the pains from a business point of view, sporting point of view, schools and all of that. And he reflects a lot on the story of Yusuf Chabgarda, who's also a writer. And then, of course, our story moving from 20th Street in Lenasia into Lens. And he reflects my feelings as a youngster who refused to actually move. But I had to move because the rest of the family were, and I'd have nowhere else to stay. And then Razina Teba, as I mentioned earlier, has written this book on Foster Street. So to me, to write is very important. And of all the schools in years gone by, they may be having speech contests and book quizzes and that. But there's a Muslim school in Lodium that has had a literary day for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been very successful. They call writers. And that's a fantastic way to inspire young children to tell your stories and to, as you grow up, as Fakir said earlier on, talk to the old people, because in time you'll have stories to tell. So for me, writing is the be-all and end-all of everything. And had it not been for the great books of history, the religious books as well, including our Holy Quran, where would the planet be today? So for me, that's my parting shot. And I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of people coming through to meet our writers, our talented writers.
All part of the Lens 70 celebrations, which is wonderful. Fakir, your closing comments very quickly.
No, just to add, Aslam mentioned the Lodium School. Impala Primary in Lenasia, for example, has been doing this annual literacy day for years. And one year, I know I was privileged to talk alongside the late Ahmad Katrada about how important it is to read, not just write, but read as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your time this morning, Fakir Hassen and Muhammad Aslam Khota. It's been a pleasure, and viewers and listeners can look forward to more information on the Lens 70 celebrations on Salam Media every Thursday morning with myself, Najma Khota. The website is on our screen. Please look into the website. You'll find the articles, you'll find the events, and as we progress into the celebration year, you will access information on our website. So with that, I greet you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That's it for this week's edition of the podcast series on the Lens 70 celebrations. I'll be back with you next week, inshallah, at the same time. Assalamu alaikum.